Hey, this is Don Muskies, production manager for Alanis Morissette, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
As seen through Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, concert tours can add millions, if not billions of dollars into the national economy. Large entertainment ventures like the Eras Tour and Beyoncé's recently wrapped Renaissance Tour are colossal projects, and their success depends on project leadership to manage the many stakeholders, budgets, and plans involved. A lack of proper management can cause big challenges that delay or threaten the success of those live events. Oh boy, can they. Which simply isn't an option when fans are dishing out hard-earned money for a fun and smooth show. Jim Digby, who's joining us today, is the president of Showmakers, Inc., and he is a PMP certified project manager with extensive experience managing concerts, festivals, and other live events, and provides us with behind-the-scenes look at how these concert tours come together, including pre-tour planning, life on the road, and things that fans may not be thinking about as they enter the venue for showtime. His nearly 4 decades in the industry has had him working alongside such acts as Linkin Park, Enrique Iglesias, Backstreet Boys, the Bolshoi Ballet, and Phil Collins, just to name a few. Jim, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Long-time listener, first-time caller, I think.
Very good. Yeah. We always like long-time listeners, first-time callers, especially when they get to be on the show. You have quite an extensive background, and how I always like to start with the guests that we have on the show. How did you get into the business?
How far back do you want me to go, Bob? I was a fifth grader. I was 10 years old when my fifth grade teacher asked me to be the master of ceremonies and the technician for the May Day parade. And it was off to the races from there.
Wow.
I was lucky enough to grow up in a school district that had a broad theater and television program, and that was it.
You got into working with several acts. Did that come by chance, or were you referred? How did you get into that role with working so many of these megastars that I mentioned?
Yeah, part of that's luck, and part of that's being in the right place at the right time, and part of that's having the right energy, I suspect, Bob. I had a journey that brought me from the nightclub business as a technician to Disney as a technician to a traveling museum tour, the Bill of Rights tour, that was led by a production manager who was the same production manager that handled Genesis, Phil Collins, and others. And at the end of that experience, where he and I first met on this Bill of Rights tour, he asked me to come along and work with him on the next Genesis Stadium tour. And I think he wasn't sure where to put me. He put me in a stage manager role, which I was clearly over my head in, but survived it. He put some safety nets around me and survived it, and worked alongside of he and Phil Collins for a few years. And then it was just one gig after another from there.
I think when we all first start out in the business, and I've reiterated this several times on the show, it's pretty much a baptism by fire, especially as you said, you get in over your head and you don't know what you're doing. My first gig was as a stage manager and a guitar tech, and I was like, sure. And you find out in very short order if you want to survive in this business. Interesting footnote, my older sister, who has never, ever, ever been in the business, she's an accountant by trade, works with a lot of ones and zeros, things I would never understand. She actually sent me a picture last weekend. She was a production runner for a concert in their town, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I'm actually getting to peek behind the curtain and see that it's not all glitz and glamour. There's a lot of hard work that goes on."
That's exactly right. It's interesting for friends outside of the business to see the work that goes on to produce a concert or any other type of live event for that matter. It's a very long work day. There's no such thing as an 8-hour shift, and there's a ticking clock that begins from the morning of load in until the door time. You can't circumvent it. It's not something you can put on pause and come back tomorrow on, and it's quite a bit of hard work.
You talk about in your notes that I received the day-to-day challenges that tour teams come across. And I actually like that. That's kind of a great way to describe people that are on the road, the tour teams. And it's some things that seem to be happening at least more frequent over the past couple of years. One of the things I'm noticing now, Beyonce's tour, Taylor Swift's tour, Metallica's tour, these are not the norm. They're not going up in 4 or 5 or 6 hours. It's taking days to build these sets and these sceneries and roll the multiple semis in. Is that becoming the norm for the major tours now? Do they have to do that because that's what the fan is expecting?
I don't know that that's new so much, Bob. I think, because of the nature of social media and instant news, we're seeing more behind the scenes than we ever saw before. But the idea that a show, a colossal show like a Genesis or like a Metallica or a Taylor Swift, requires more than one day of build time is certainly not new. And in some instances, when we started putting mega steel structures together 30 years ago, these were 2 and 3 systems out on the road of the steel, and the management around that project was to layer in the components so that what was a 5-day build for the steel came down to a 3-day build, and then the rigging came in the day before with some of the elements, perhaps PA, and then major production elements, the special effects, the staging, everything else came in on show day. These kinds of layered builds have been happening. I guess we're hearing about them more now because Taylor Swift and Beyonce are soaking up the news media, yeah?
Well, and it doesn't hurt that Taylor Swift is now has a movie out, and so many people are posting videos on social media from attending these shows. And somebody just posted some video the other day of Kiss's farewell concert they played here at the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville. I'm thinking the cost involved. I mean, the labor alone, not counting the infrastructure of the staff and all the physical components such as you said, sound and lights and set and scenery. That's probably why we're seeing ticket prices the way they are these days.
Well, I think the whole industry's been shook up by COVID most recently, but then when record labels and the record deal changed and you could publish your own music, then butts and seats became the priority revenue generator, right? So the idea is, how do we get the audience interested when all the, especially right after COVID, every show you could think of was going on the road. So there's a great deal of supply and perhaps not enough demand for the tickets. So bigger shows got built, more spectacular shows were built to draw the audience in and to justify that ticket value. I suspect there's still a market for all layers of that. I suspect there's a market for underplayed shows, underproduction shows, as much as there is for these mega production shows.
And you brought it up. Because of COVID, we lost a lot of venues. They shut down. They couldn't keep their doors open. And the result of that now is that we're seeing a lot of acts on the road, maybe not enough venues for them to perform in, definitely a shortage of tour buses and staffing. Old goats like you and I'm surprised we haven't gotten calls yet to go back out on the road. But is that something that you think is going to ease up at any point in the future?
Well, I would hope so. I think, you had a great podcast with High Roads Trucking. I think her name was Susan. The idea is the pendulum has swung to the other side. It's like all the show buckets got turned upside down and dumped out at one time with the big major players saying, go do shows. Surely that's going to balance out, one would hope. We've lost more people than I think we have venues, and the interest level to go out and see a show is significantly higher, I would assume, because we were cooped up for so long. But eventually those things will balance out, I would imagine, and that we would see, kind of a pacing that we saw in the past with, you're not going to see Taylor every year, but perhaps every other year or every couple of years.
That's interesting that you bring up Taylor. That bodes the next question, and that is her production value that she provided to the audience, to the Swifties, was probably some of the most elaborate, intricate, and extensive production I've seen in a long time. Do you get to a point where you've kind of maybe created critical mass in that production, or do you think from your perspective there's going to be bigger and better, and maybe outlandish isn't the right word? You can't keep repeating yourself. And so at some point, do you kind of go, okay, this is going to be the next big thing, or I'm going to need to scale back a little bit and maybe simplify it? And could you get away with that if you did?
Yeah, I think that's in large part up to the creatives around the artist and the artists themselves. To what extent does artist X need large production? And once you go there, Bob, you make a great point. Can you pull back? I would argue that Kiss, without the makeup and the boots and all the fireworks, probably is a different show altogether, and they might not be able to pull back. But my tenure with Linkin Park tells a different story. Those 6 guys left it all on the stage every night. Not that Kiss doesn't, but the energy for the audience and the connection and the emotional connection with the audience was in the way they performed. So they didn't necessarily require all the elaborate special effects and scenic movements and things like that at that time, because they were still giving it their all. So the balance, I think, is in what the artist desires, what the artist requires. I like to stand the line that, the show around, the production elements around the show should enhance the story. They shouldn't be the story. As long as you've got an artist that can support that line of thinking, right? Some artists need it. Some don't need it. Fish, at the Grateful Dead, probably don't need a whole lot of production because their audience is turning up for one thing, and that's to get into the vibe and stay in the vibe for as long as possible. So why waste that money on trucks and buses and gear when it's not necessary?
I saw Jackson Browne 7 or 8 years ago, and he was doing exactly that. He had a very cold down tour where it was just simply him and 20 of his favorite guitars in racks behind him on stage, and the shows were selling out wherever he performed. Now, he was playing smaller venues. He wasn't playing arena dates. They were mostly theaters. But, Jackson Browne has enough of a deep catalog that his fans would pay the money to go see him perform an acoustic set. I think, as you said, the Grateful Dead, it's an experience. They no longer have that wall of sound behind them and haven't had it for decades. I think when Jimmy Buffett, God bless him, when he was still alive, could probably put on a show without all the theatrics and get away with it. So that brings us to the new up-and-coming acts that are still really being discovered. Those that are maybe filling theaters, they're not playing larger venues yet. Maybe they've just come out of the club circuit into the theater circuit. Are we going to see maybe that trickle-down effect of the theatrics and the special effects get into that arena of sorts? Or are these acts really just going to have to rely on their metal on stage, that I can do this with a guitar and a keyboard and drums and pull that aspect off without all the pyrotronics?
The good news is there's as is proven on television, there's an audience for everything, Bob, and there will likely be artists who will want to bring special effects at the club level, and there will likely be artists who don't need to bring special effects at the club level. It's hard to say what you're competing with. There's the TikTok influencer model where you do something incredible and one song incredible, and suddenly you're now playing in the theater, and you don't really have the catalog, as you said, to back it up. You don't have the performance, the journey from playing in the street into a theater, into a club, into an arena. You don't have that journey to refine your skill. You're thrust into this limelight, and perhaps that might be a place where more production is required in order to support an artist like that. But a genuine music artist who's, take a Billie Eilish, who's writing it in the house with her brother and making incredibly groundbreaking music, they can take that into the street and sell it probably without a whole lot of production because it's new and it's fresh. All of these things are still projects, though, that need managing, right?
We're going to take a break, get a word in for a couple of our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to continue to have some conversation with Jim Digby.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Since 1963, Korg has been creating new experiences in music and performance. That is what drove the creation of some of Korg's most legendary products, such as the Poly 6, the M1, the Electribe, the Triton, the Minilogue, the Kronos, Wave State, Op6, and most recently the Nautilus, which is what we have here in our studio. Korg is dedicated to creating new, innovative, and uncompromising instruments which maintain the highest quality to inspire music makers, past, present, and future. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products and start creating new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook, 101 Ways to Help You Improve Your Chances of Success. That's right. Everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena, and believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics. All written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message. Thanks.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, Jim Digby is sitting across the proverbial podcast table. One of the things that I noticed on your resume as I read it is you are a PMP certified project manager. What is that exactly?
It is the PMI Institute, I think, was born in 1965 right here in the Delaware Valley area, somewhere in the 60s, to begin building a roadmap for what it meant to manage projects. What is a project? How do you define a project? And what mechanisms and rules of the road, as you were, are required to successfully execute a project? And I'm sure that's evolved quite a bit since 65. For me, I'm astounded that our industry, and this ties into the Event Safety Alliance as well, does not have a requirement for those who are in the adult in charge role, if you will, the tour managers, the production managers. There's no license, there's no education for it. Everything is on the job training. You can succeed despite yourself and move up into ever bigger acts and ever bigger shows with 0 credentials other than what you've learned on the job or perhaps been mentored to have. And I was fortunate enough to be working in Saudi Arabia in 2018, helping to produce the first ever show on the ground there. And there was a great deal of influence over the Saudi stakeholders by PricewaterhouseCoopers and Deloitte and these other big, Boston Consulting Group, these big mega consulting firms. And there was a PMP assigned to the job, whose role really was monitoring the conversations that were happening between our team, the producing team, the expats, and the local Saudi team. And I grew more curious over time watching this person interact, to the point where I inquired, what's a PMP? What's your role here? What are you doing? And he was working for Price Waterhouse and auditing the processes through which the money got spent, the way the job got executed, and just, looking after the accountability between the entities, all the multiple stakeholders, to execute this mega show in Saudi Arabia. And the more I dug in, it was the first time I'd heard of it. And the more I dug in, the more I felt like, well, I'm a PMP. The work I do as a production manager and a tour manager is project management. What does that mean? How come this credential doesn't apply to me, or I don't know about this credential? So link that to what we're attempting to achieve with the Event Safety Alliance, which is raise the bar of those who steward shows, those who become the adults in charge, to recognize risk as something that's you can be accountable for, that you can create mechanisms to avoid, and raise the value of the education going into those who become project managers, or in our lingo, production managers and tour managers, so that there is a measurable skill set to someone taking on that role, and that there is an equatable lexicon across industries. If I'm producing an event and I speak roadie speak, but I'm being overlooked by PricewaterhouseCoopers and they want to know more about what I'm doing, wouldn't it be interesting if I could speak their language? So that prompted me to start taking the training to become a project management professional through the Project Management Institute, and eventually attain that credential. Just after that, just after I got the credential, COVID hit. So what COVID had us all doing in the music space was, where are we going to get paid now? What's our next job? How are we going to, where do we go to work? Well, our resumes, while incredible with the work that we've done, the shows that we've built and everything else, are really something to behold in a lot of cases. They don't translate to Amazon. They don't translate to Saudi Aramco. Roadie just doesn't mean anything outside of our world, nor does production manager. It means something completely different in a factory space. So it turns out that having the PMP helped me translate the skills that I am able to achieve as a production manager into other work environments where I might have otherwise been ignored because I was claiming, telling in my resume that I'm a production manager. So that was the onset of the PMP journey for me.
Is that something that tour managers, production managers, people within the industry, tour directors, is that something that they should achieve, to accomplish, to add on their resume? Does it really help, especially in the music world? Because honestly, until I read your bio, I had never heard of it, and it's something that really doesn't adhere to the industry from a practicality standpoint. I don't know.
Well, it's a challenge, and I think the more, and again, this goes back to the Event Safety Alliance. How can we, instead of building something from scratch, is there a comparable out there that helps level the skill sets required to be the adult in charge? That was in the mindset while taking this course. So while it is not yet a direct comparable to production management. Production management is a direct comparable to project management. A tour has a beginning and it has an end, and it has these phases it goes through. You initiate the tour by understanding what it is that it's going to be. How big is this beast? What are the budget constraints, et cetera? Who are the stakeholders? And then you move into the planning phase of that, where you're putting together, this is my trucking vendor, this is my lighting vendor, here are the dates, here are the drives, et cetera. And then you move into the execution phase, where you're out there and you're doing it, and you're monitoring and you're controlling the event. And then you bring the event to a closure. So those parameters exist inside the PMP, and there is not yet a tremendous driving force to cause PMP to be the thing that designates a competent production manager. But one could argue that the future is a more qualified workforce, a more learned workforce where risk is a consideration. Part of what you learn in the PMP journey is risk analysis, risk assessing, the things that we don't do as as production managers. So in one idealized version of the world, I think that there's a great deal of need for a PMP type qualification for the adults in charge in a touring circumstance or a live event circumstance where none other exists.
We saw a very unfortunate situation happen a few years ago at a state fair here in the U.S. where a major headliner was going to take the stage, but they had a storm front coming through. And you may remember this when it happened. They didn't lower the roof of the stage, and these high winds and torrential rains came through and literally destroyed the lighting truss, the rig. In fact, this was mind-blowing for me. They actually had the truss spot operators up in the truss when the storm was coming. And I believe one of them were killed. Several were injured and they had the attendees in the venue. They didn't clear the venue. Several people were injured. And you would really think that foresight would have caused someone to look at a weather radar and go, this is not good. We need to take care of this. But instead, now you have lawsuits. The band, I believe, wound up breaking up over this. And it was a very unfortunate but definitely foreseen situation that was happening. And as you said, and I love your terminology, we have adults in the room that should be making these decisions. It shouldn't come down to someone who's like, I don't know, it's not my job. And we've got to prevent these things from happening in the future.
You're speaking on, I think, of the Indiana State Fair stage collapse, which is, in fact, the catalyzing moment to the creation of the Event Safety Alliance. And there were 2 state-funded forensic reports that came out of that moment. One is the Thornton-Tomasetti report, which looked at the structural failures that actually caused the stage to collapse and how the wind acted on the stage and what condition the stage was in before the storm. And there was the Witt report, which examined the policies and procedures and the communications and practices around actioning a plan. We actually teach this moment in time. It is, as I said, the catalyzing moment to create the Event Safety Alliance. For me, seeing that happen caused this great, oh my gosh, how did that happen? That could have happened to me. Why did it happen? What don't I know? And this cascade of concerns for self-survival. Would I have acted any differently in that moment? And then this incredible passion to go learn more, looking around and discovering that there's no education for me if I want to behave safely. There's nowhere, I can't find that anywhere. This is 2011. And then this analysis that, well, so when we teach it, we say, what caused people to die in Indiana? And it's in fact, 7 people died there, Bob. And the audience often says, well, the weather blew over the roof or the stage was unstable. And while those things are true, what really caused people to die was the lack of an actionable plan. And the inability for the cross-functional teams and the multiple stakeholders and the multiple jurisdictions to speak with one another. Police, fire, and medical had a plan. Indiana State Fair had a plan. The artist had a plan. None of those people spoke to each other. And in fact, 30 minutes before that stage collapsed, 60 miles up the road, or 60 minutes before it collapsed, 30 miles up the road, one or the other, that very same gust front blew through at a symphony. But the symphony had evacuated. They had an action plan that they could action. People went to safe shelter. Nobody got hurt. The very same storm came to Indiana, and the action plan, if there was one, couldn't be actioned because of this paralysis of decision-making. Hence why we think the PMP, the risk management program, and these others are a North Star that help our industry not make catastrophic mistakes like that anymore.
It was just mind-blowing to watch the video, and having been a production manager myself, a tour manager myself, and seeing situations in the past in the Midwest, which along with the South is known for their storms, you try to take precautions, you try to assimilate all the information, but I think you're right, the communication skills just weren't there, and the adults in the room, I would assume, they weren't talking to each other. They weren't playing nice. or whatever that situation was that caused, as you said, 7 deaths. Are there implementations in place? Are there ground control actions in place that's going to prevent that from happening in the future in the majority of events? Or are we still kind of in the dinosaur times where we're going to take the risk and hope that that doesn't happen in the future?
The DJ came on the stage before that stage collapsed, and one of the things he said was, "We're hoping for the best, and we don't see hope as a plan." The direct answer to your question, Bob, is that because of the advent of the Event Safety Alliance, which caused many people like me to coalesce around this idea that we have to do better and we have to raise the bar, we've actually managed to change policy at the insurance level. We wrote the industry's only published guidance for safety at live events. 350 pages of it was produced in 2014. 3 years after the event happened. We took the draft of that to the Indiana governor at the time because he was about to enact some really damaging rules around producing shows. For instance, the first audience member had to be outside the fall radius of the stage. Well, that would have crippled the shows. So we asked for time. We said, look, the industry is best to solve this problem for itself. Here's the course of action we plan to take. Give us a minute. We're going to come back to you with some results. So at that time, insurance industry folks created weather cancellation insurance around the accumulation of rain. That was it. Not wind, not lightning, anything else. Your policy kicked in if so much rain accumulated over so much time. Well, that's not the threat. The threat is wind and lightning. So we helped create with the National Weather Service and NOAA, we helped create an actionable weather plan template that allows an event producer to create the trigger criteria and log the trigger criteria to what happens when the weather looks like this. When winds are at 10 miles an hour, take down the pop-up tents. When winds are at 20 miles an hour, this action happens. And we simplified the process through which event planners can plan for adverse weather. And we did that with some credible resources, National Weather Service, NOAA. And we train and teach to that at the Event Safety Alliance now. It's a 2-day training academy where you can learn what you don't know about weather and you think you know about weather, where to get actionable weather data from, and what to do with that data. So that's the big change that we've made. We've also helped the insurance companies see that they need to write policy to lightning encroachment and wind speeds. They've made that change. We host an annual summit at the Event Safety Alliance every year where we gather thought leaders from around the world and talk about how we can do better and then action that. And our book, our 350-page guidance, is now going through the American National Standards Institute, and we now have 6 American National Standards in publication, gone through peer review, that speak to crowd safety, security safety, weather safety, structural safety, fire safety, and one other. It's going to leave my brain right now. So we're elevating the bar of reasonable behavior, reasonable expectation through the Event Safety Alliance so that event producers have something to hang their hat on when they plan for these things. So, yeah, we're helping to make that change.
On the show with us today, Jim Digby, we are talking about all things regarding the touring aspect of the industry. We're going to take a break, get a word in for one of our sponsors, and when we come back, we'll have some more conversation.
You're listening to the business side of music.
It may have been Tammy Wynette who sang Stand By Your Man, but it was actually Nancy Jones who stood by the legendary George Jones for more than 30 years and helped bring him to the light. Now in her new book, Playin' Possum, readers get an intimate look at the country music legend through the eyes of his wife and partner. Nancy knew George Jones better than anyone. The good and the bad, the horrendous and the hilarious. Married in 1983, George quit his wild and wicked ways for a while, but Nancy learned all too soon that there were demons holding a strong grip on the man she loved. People who knew the possum credit Nancy's tenacious love, faith, and encouragement for saving George's life and rebuilding his career. For the first time in Playin' Possum, Nancy Jones reveals the true insider perspective and little-known stories about the country music legend, his battles with cocaine, alcohol, abusive behavior, battles with himself, and against the demons that sought to control and destroy him. Read the compelling first-hand account from the woman who refused to give up on George Jones. Playin' Possum is available now. Order your copy today from nancyjonesbooks.com, Amazon, and more.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives. Whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio with Jim Digby. You have had quite the history touring with so many acts. Was there one tour or one artist in particular that maybe set the bar for you, or was such an educational moment that you still carry that with you, if that makes sense?
It absolutely makes sense, and I would say that every journey I've had with every show has been a learning experience. I'm a lover of learning, and I'm a lover of self-evaluation and reflecting on the things that I did well and things that I didn't do well. You know, in the PMP speak, I'm doing my own SWOT analysis every chance I get. I would say that, you know, Phil Collins set a bar for absolute professionalism when it comes to an artist communicating his show notes and desires back to the team. You know, he showed up every day and he gave it every day. Certainly my 16 years with Linkin Park, almost the entirety of their journey, was a great learning curve for me. I was coming from Marilyn Manson at the time, where there were not many rules into the Linkin Park space, and those guys treated the business as a business. It was not the old school adage at all in the Linkin Park family and domain, and that allowed me to redirect my path to meet theirs and take the business more seriously. And, you know, sure, I made errors along the way and hopefully improved along the way, as we all do. They gave me the space to do that, to discover how to be better every day. You know, the business is such that if you're impassioned by it, you love what you do. You don't have to set an alarm clock in the morning, and you get up and you do it and you try to do it better tomorrow. So I'm just grateful for every artist experience I've had. I mean, I was around when the MTV Unplugged series was happening, working with MTV for a bit. I stood on stage when James Hetfield set himself on fire in 1992 with the Guns N' Roses Metallica debacle, and then Axl started a riot of 55,000 people. And then I was standing on stage as one of the stage managers of Woodstock 99. So, you know, I've had these really remarkable moments that have shaped my safety DNA. They've shaped my calm under pressure DNA in most cases. They've, you know, it is learning from each of those moments that's caused me to be who and where I am today.
I mentioned it briefly earlier. If you received a phone call today to go back out on the road, would you?
Bob, I'm trying to tell myself I don't want to sleep on a bus anymore. And I'm trying to shift the experiences that I've had to a consulting model. There's an artist or two that I would go sleep on a bus for, to answer you frankly. And, you know, I still love it. I still love what I do, and I want to do more of it. No question.
Yeah, that's really the main reason that I took over this podcast from Tom Sabella, who created it. He started this back in 2009, and I took it over in 2016. Late 2016, it was, I like sleeping in my own bed at night, and I don't have to deal with the aggravation and the frustration of 20 different personalities. But there are still times I just have to go stand by a tour bus for a couple minutes.
Smell the diesel.
Smell the diesel. Yeah, people think I'm crazy, but they don't get it.
It's funny. I would have told you, 2019 or January 2020, I would have told you I'm sleeping on a bus till the end comes. And then I realized, oh, well, I can be a father and a husband. And, here I was 20 years into the marriage, and I wasn't really being a husband, and I wasn't really being a father, even though I was coming home and playing with my kids. And then COVID, this, oh my gosh, my wife looked at me one day 6 months into it. She's like, "You're still here?" And I felt like, I'm still here. And it really, you know, we had a rocky spot where, we've never really been married before. You know, it's always been this traveling. I've just come in and go out. Yeah. And now we have to face the reality that we're really married and that we really have kids. I really have kids in the sense that, this is what true fathering looks like. You know, this is what parenting is. And that discovery, although rocky at first, has leveled off to this wondrous thing where I wouldn't miss a minute. And so that's, more than anything about sleeping in a tour bus, it's really about parting time with them, losing time with them at the ages that they're at right now.
Yeah, and you can't get that back. My daughter and son came to visit my wife and I a few weeks ago, and we were all sitting around and started sharing memories of what it was like when Dad was on the road. And I remember my daughter brought up a story that I had completely forgotten about. And she had come out to visit me on the road. She was young. I think she was a teenager at that point. And she shared this story, and I went, "You remember that?" And she goes, "Oh, yeah, that was a great memory." But you're right. You're not home for them. You're not there for their baseball games and their ballet recitals. And it's tough. And I think, being a dad on the road is twice as hard as being a dad at home.
Yeah. And thank goodness nowadays for FaceTime and things, tools like that.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine doing it without them.
We didn't have that 20 years ago. So how can people find you, learn more about what we've talked about here today, all of that good stuff?
Well, so the Event Safety Alliance it's actually eventsafetyalliance.org is where you can get the free American National Standards and the guidebook downloadable for free there. PMI.org for the Project Management Institute. I really think this is the future, Bob. I think that there's enough comparables inside what we do as roadies versus what project managers do around the rest of the world in big applications, construction projects, Saudi Aramco, you name it. The comparables are good enough that if we start thinking about raising the bar of our adults in charge, maybe through the PMI or some other means, I think better outcomes will come. And then if, I'm available to mentor anytime, you can find me on LinkedIn, Jim Digby there, and I'm happy to communicate with anybody.
I appreciate you taking the time to be on the show today. And I say this a lot, but I truly mean this. This was a wealth of information. And you and I went down a couple paths that I didn't have on my notes, but I'm glad we did.
Well, let's do it again, Bob. There's plenty more.
We definitely will. Jim, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.
This tape will self-destruct in 5 seconds.